He's the one who pulled out of his interview. And if he has something he wants to say, he can say it to our face. That's really what they did here. What do you make of it?
What? Yeah, and remember 60 Minutes. The reason Donald Trump pulled out of the interview is because of how terrible of a job you have done through his argument. That's the crucial part of this. He didn't just pull out of the interview.
So if you're an America First type individual and you're paying attention to what's going on with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, you'll know that Kamala Harris has been losing ground in the polls and even the poly markets, which is the betting markets there. And in an attempt to save her candidacy, she has been making the rounds on all of these Democrat-leaning mainstream media mouthpieces, and like Stephen Colbert, Howard Stern, The View. She even went on 60 Minutes, and then Fox News with Bret Baier, who was obviously her most difficult interview. But I would argue that the second most difficult interview that she did was the one with 60 Minutes. Everybody else pretty much just kissed her butt and asked the questions that they were supposed to and stayed in their lane. Whereas the interviewer from 60 Minutes kind of challenged her, repeated his questions and said, "You're not answering my questions," that type of thing, right? But now 60 Minutes has come out and they're trying to address some of the edits that they've made in their interview, of course, to make Kamala Harris look better than she actually performed. And in this one, Megyn Kelly breaks down 60 Minutes assessment, their excuse, and then completely destroys them with guest host Emily Jasinski and Atlanta Johnson. And in this one, Megyn Kelly basically breaks down 60 Minutes excuses and compares them to how 60 Minutes treated Donald Trump in the past. And then they relate that to the most recent event where Donald Trump declined going on 60 Minutes. She is joined by guest host Emily Jasinski and Atlanta Johnson for this one. I really had a good time actually watching this interview and this breakdown, and I wanted to show it to you guys. So let's go ahead and just get right into it.
Now, what we saw in 60 Minutes was not just like 10 words that we heard in the 40-word salad version that came out the day before. They weren't in the first word salad answer, which is why a lot of us were like, where did that come from? Did that even come from the same answer? Or did it come from later down in the transcript? They seem to be saying it came from the same answer, but there's absolutely no proof of that, just 60 Minutes words that it was in response to the same question and part of the same answer. So honestly, then at least put out a transcript of the full answer. Just do that. At a minimum, just do that. Put out a transcript of the full answer so we can see where you pulled from. And how much more was there, by the way? Was there a whole bunch more? How much did you do to cover up for her and make her sound more cogent, again, than she was? So they say same question, same answer, but a different portion of the response. When we edit any interview, whether a politician, athlete, a movie star, we strive to be clear, accurate, and on point. The portion of her answer on 60 was more succinct, which allows time for other subjects in a wide-ranging 21-minute-long segment. Then, amazingly, they go back to this. Remember, Mr. Trump pulled out of his interview with 60 Minutes and the vice president participated. Our long-standing invitation to former President Trump remains open. If he would like to discuss the issues facing the nation and the Harris interview, we would be happy to have him on 60 Minutes. Just in case you had any doubt, Emily, of their hackery, they begin and end with Donald Trump. Trump is the one making the accusation. No, it's most of the nation at this point who sees what you did, at least the right half. And it ends with, he's the one who pulled out of his interview. And if he has something he wants to say, he can say it to our face. That's really what they did here. What do you make of it?
What? Yeah, and remember 60 Minutes. The reason Donald Trump pulled out of the interview is because of how terrible of a job you have done through his argument. That's the crucial part of this. He didn't just pull out of the interview. He's making an argument himself that they have done a horrible job covering his career, covering his politics since 2016, since that Leslie Stahl hatchet job. Like Donald Trump, it's not just coming out of absolutely nowhere. They've been more favorable to Kamala Harris than they have to Donald Trump. So if you're going to throw that jab, I mean, again, I think it makes them look bad. It makes them look bitter, and it makes them look like they're doubling down on something that most people would look at and say, all right, obviously there's a problem. We saw A, we saw B, and you're not letting us see the actual transcript itself. So we know that there's a discrepancy. You've already proven that. You've already proven one part that you aired is different than the spirit of another part that you aired. You've already proven that the editing is deceptive. So, because we know, we know one of the answers looked differently than the other answer. So we know that there was manipulation, period. And the only way to disprove this would be to release the transcript, and you won't do that. And I think maybe the bigger picture part of this is CBS, and I would say a lot of other dinosaurs of corporate media, but especially those broadcast networks, are not remotely prepared for this new era of news consumer. They don't understand this generation of news consumer. They think they can get away with this by doubling down instead of losing the trust of actually probably millions of people around the country who are looking at this and are saying, wow, you manipulated this. And by the way, people on both sides of the Israel thing who are upset about this. So there's a lot of young people who don't agree with us on these issues and are looking at CBS from the left and are upset about it. I mean,
I don't blame them.
They're such dinosaurs. They think they can get away with this. They're not prepared that now everybody is used to full transcripts. Everybody wants full transcripts. They're used to it. They're used to seeing Trump on Theo Vaughn or Kamala Harris even on Call Her Daddy, whatever. They can't get away with this stuff anymore.
I was saying to our team, Eliana, that, I mean, of course, I've been a part of countless interviews on camera of people where they're pre-taped and the person goes on and on. I mean, I'll tell you a famous one with Donald Trump. Back in the 2016 election, I said, Mr. Trump, would you give me an interview? And he said, sure, but do me a favor. I don't want to be edited, because we had to pre-tape it. He couldn't do it when I was live in the air. And I said, no, I don't agree. And he's like, I don't want to be edited. I'm like, well, I can't just cede the show to you. You know, we have to do it. I will edit it, but I will make sure all of your points, the substantive points are included, which is what happened. And sure enough, when I sat down with Trump, all he kept saying was two things: China, 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 and the wall, the wall, the wall. And that's fine. We cut it down. He wanted me to have him reference those points 500 times. And in the end, it only wound up being like 15 each. Okay. So that's normal. We do that all the time in television. But what's not normal is to take a piece of the answer that is not connected to the answer that you've released as the answer and sub it in as the new answer in a way that reflects better on the candidate. And then part two is when it blows up in your face and people are accusing you of trying to help her as partisan hacks, to not just say, I've got nothing to hide here. I mean, I happily released that whole transcript of Trump, China, 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 500 times. You'd be bored to tears, but you'd be thanking me for what I did there. But they won't. They won't even release the full transcript of this Q&A, Eliana, which is very strange and suggests to me they do have something to hide.
And that's something that's become more and more common amongst the Democratic Party. What's his name? Merrick Garland was he just completely refused a congressional subpoena when Congress literally subpoenaed the full transcript of Joe Biden's interview with Robert Hur. And they wouldn't do it. They're like, well, here's the written interview, but we're not going to give you the videotape of it, right? And it's just like, okay, you're obviously hiding something. There's no reason not to. And how are we supposed to trust, just like in this case, your word that the written transcript isn't edited? Because of course, like Megyn Kelly just mentioned, we're just supposed to take 60 Minutes word that the answers are directly related to the questions that were asked, and we're not supposed to assume at all that they did anything to make her look better in those answers, which, we know that that's something that's been going on with Joe Biden, at least for his candidacy, his presidency, I should say, but maybe even longer than that, because we know the guy can't speak an answer a question at all. And that goes for pretty much the majority of the mainstream media. They always will go in and say, well, he meant to say it like this, and then they'll doctor it up and make it look nice and, presidential for him, rather than just give us the direct answer that came out of his mouth, especially if it was a written interview, or, even with video interviews, they'll go ahead and doctor them up and make them look better, because obviously they're subservient to the Democratic Party, which is funny because these are the same mainstream media outlets that were out here telling us that there's nothing wrong with him, although they know better. It's, they're the ones that are making him look better on the interviews. If they weren't, how can they say that Joe Biden was coherent and strong and everything like that, knowing that they're out there doctoring his interviews to actually make him look better than what he really is? Meanwhile, on the other hand, anytime Donald Trump does an interview, they go out of their way to do the exact opposite. They're telling you that he's deranged and he's lost his mind and all this stuff, and they're doctoring their interviews to suit their narrative. And it's just disgusting, and it just goes to show that we can't really trust the mainstream media one bit. They all have an agenda. They all have some, high dollar, rich person funding them, or somebody that they're trying to please that's up higher than them, rather than just catering to, or not even catering to, but just knowing their audience and giving the truth, telling the news, right? They don't even fact check like they used to anymore. And that's an attributing factor to why and how independent media has grown at the rate that it has. People don't trust the mainstream media, and they want to know the full story, and so they have to go off the mainstream to get more of a story than the mainstream is willing to offer. And so that's where we come into Megyn Kelly. That's where we find, the Tim Pools, the Patrick Bet-Davids, the America First TVs of the world. And we can actually learn a little bit more, especially if the source is dedicated to actually just telling the truth. They're not serving a narrative. They're not subservient to, a billionaire or whatever. But let's listen to Alana Johnson's response, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this one up.
So there are a lot of different angles to this. The first is about the answer itself, and CBS's statement says, look, we did this for time. Well, actually, let me take a step back. It's interesting that they essentially address their statement to Trump. Sure, they do owe Donald Trump an explanation, but they really owe an explanation to their viewers, many of whom have raised questions about this. And so I do think it's a red herring in their statement that they focus on Trump. Second, with regard to the answer to this question itself, they say, we made this edit for the sake of time, which of course, everybody knows that 60 Minutes edits. But what is atypical here is that they teased one answer and they aired another, and that is not typical. And that is why people raised questions and became confused. And I found it striking that they don't cop to any error there. There was obviously a mistake made. I wouldn't be surprised if both clips are actually from the same answer, but clearly somebody made a mistake here inside of CBS. I'm sure this is not how they planned for everything to go. And then they end the statement by complaining that Trump didn't grant them an interview when he doesn't owe them anything. And that was really off key to me. He does not owe CBS News a sit down. They, in fact, owe people an explanation for the mistake that was made here. And I do think it's important to note that this is happening against the backdrop of another scandal that's playing out at CBS, which is that the network president and the head of news called morning news anchor Tony Dockapil on the carpet for his interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates. And then the largest shareholder of Paramount, which owns CBS News, Shari Redstone, said she sided with Tony Dockapil on this. And that has been a very public scandal playing out. And so something is not right with CBS, the leadership of CBS, to have these two highly public scandals playing out in the newspapers 2 weeks before a presidential election.
I agree. This is not a good look for CBS at all to be involved in two public scandals. And, it's a dead giveaway anytime you're questioning somebody from the left, whether it be CBS or Cenk Uygur or David Pacman or just whoever, right? And instead of giving you the straight up answer to your question, they divert to orange man bad. But Donald Trump said this, or Donald Trump won't do that. And that's what we have here. CBS basically deflected, 60 Minutes basically deflects and says, well, we offered Donald Trump an opportunity to come on here and give his own words, his own perspective. And it's like, yeah, right. Look at how you treated the Kamala Harris interview. You try to make her look better. We know you don't like Donald Trump, so you're going to try to make him look worse. You did it last time he was on with you guys. It was pretty shameful, and I'm surprised he didn't get up and walk out. The only reason he probably didn't is because the left would run with that too. They would say, oh, he cowered in shame and fear or something like that. And that's just how vile and dedicated this mainstream media, this left-loving Democrat mainstream media, is to their cause. And so anyways, with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I want to let you know, if you're an America First type, you are in the right place. So make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video, and come join me Saturdays at 8 p.m. for my podcast. I go live. It's called the Jar Openers Podcast. We have a good time, and I love to engage and have a conversation with you guys. So hopefully I see you there, but if not, I'll see you guys in my next video.